Hello, welcome. I'm Deborah Lawton and this is my home studio. I'm a professional artist who also teaches at Aliki's Art House in Calgary, Alberta. We've recently gone online and had great success with teaching our students in a new format, and we just want to share a bit of it with you. Aliki's Art House is a place where we believe creativity happens, and every day when we teach all ages, we enjoy watching that magic come together as students discover their creativity. We firmly believe that creativity, or drawing in particular, is a skill. It's something that you are taught by somebody who knows these skills, just like if you were learning to ride a bike or learning to swim or even learning to drive a car. Somebody would teach you. And that's what we're about at Aliki's Art House. We love teaching. We love watching that light go on for our students. And we're excited that you found us. And we're happy that you can come and check us out at alikisarthouse.com. I'm about to share with you some really interesting ways of what I call decoding a drawing. And it happens to be a cat. And then we're going to do a little bit of color theory in regards to adding some watercolor to it. So I'm going to switch to my other camera and then we'll get started. Okay, so I'm at my overhead camera now, and I just wanted to share with you the steps that we go through to do this drawing and this painting. And I've got a handout that we use for teaching it, and we'll just go through the steps together. So first you want to find an image, and a full-on face forward cat is kind of a fun one to do. And the thing that a lot of people find that, how do I draw this? So if you go into and move it into a black and white photocopy, it really helps you to see more of the basic shapes. So then you can see how I've drawn on here the basic shapes, and that's what we're going to draw, is these basic shapes. Once we do the basic shapes, you're able to add more detail and then do whatever fun painting or coloring. So one of the principles that we teach at Aliki's is basic shapes to start with and breaking things down into those shapes. So here I've got my cat, and I'm looking at it just as the oval. I'm looking at these as triangles. I look at this as a curve, a triangle. So really thinking very simple, because even though there's more of a curve around here, we can change that after we get our sketching done. And so that's what it would be. So I'm going to go through these steps with you and show you how we do it. First of all, I'm going to grid my page. Gridding helps a lot because it gives you a smaller section of page as opposed to doing kind of where do I start and where do I begin. So I'm just going to find half. This is 8.5, so that would be 4.25 and 4.25. And then when you grid for a drawing, you don't want to press hard. You just want to barely touch that page so you can see it there just a smidge, because we want that grid to be able to be taken or removed after we've done our drawing. So the grid's there as a guideline, and this is one of those tools of teaching, always starting with a grid. And I do this in the studio with my beginner drawers and even my adult, always starting with our grid. Then I can take my visual, which I have already pre-worked out where my basic shapes are. And you can see too how, even though this ear has a bit of a jut in here, it's still, if we look at it as the big shape, that's what we want to translate that. Now this cat is, we can do it pretty close to the same ratio. I'm not going to do anything called scaling up, just because that's a whole other lesson. So if I take from here to here, from my center, and I go to, where is this? It's more than halfway. Or actually, is it? Yeah, it's about halfway up this line. So where's halfway? Somewhere there. And if I look at where is this point, it's really close to that edge. So there's that point. And then I'm looking at how this curve goes. So decoding a drawing is breaking it down. And now I'm doing something called muscle memory, which we also teach at the studio. It's something that allows you to do the same shape over and over. And then I get that shape. So there's that curve. And you notice it's quite a light line. It's not dark, because I want it to be able to, we're going to ink it afterwards. Then I'm looking at this angle, and where does that angle come? Somewhere in here. And I see that it doesn't go right to that point, so I'm going to make my triangle kind of go like that. So that's roughly that section number 1. So now let's go over to number 2. And one of the ways too that we also teach it is we break it down into smaller sections, and we look only at this section too. So it really helps you to only see this section and not anything else. So let's look again at, now we can look at the 2 sections, and I can say where is that? We already have this point, so where is this one? It's over here. And I could do my muscle memory, or I can just kind of look at it and say it's sort of like that shape. And then this triangle, where does that go? I can see that they're almost equal. So always judging, almost equal, and going up. And where does it come to? Comes somewhere down here. So when I'm teaching, I also tell my students that drawing is kind of like going on a road trip. You want to know, where am I starting? Where am I going? So where's the beginning? Where's your destination? And then you can map out where you're going from there. So now we've got this point. Where are we going? We want to go to, I don't know if it's halfway. See, I'm measuring. It's a little bit more than halfway. So if I look, where's halfway? A little bit more than halfway is here. And this comes and curves more sharply here. The thing about doing an animal too is it doesn't have to be as accurate necessarily as human, because we see animals a little different than we see our human beings, because we look at ourselves every day and we see how things, our eyes and everything, if they're the wrong shape, we will see that. So this is just 2 curved lines, 1 curved line here, and I've looked at, from my grid line, how far over is it here and how far up there. So I can say it's roughly here and down there. So my curve's going to come like that. And I'll just put this little line in here to give me an idea of where that part of the eye is. So there's that part. Oh, and I need to find where this little triangle goes. And you notice it touches right on that tip. And it's somewhere like that. Now let's look at the other side. And we have pretty much everything there for our points, because we've got all of these points that gives us our starting, our destination, and when you're sketching, it's just back and forth, very light lines, and you don't have to worry about going, oh my goodness, I made a mistake, because this is when you're sketching, This is where it allows you to look at something and then go back and go, oh, this curve is a little wrong or a little off, and then we can do that. So that's kind of this shape, and I just want to look at where this line is here, and it starts here and it kind of goes over there, and then the other part of his or her neck comes right up here. Okay, so that's our basic shapes. We've got that in there. And then we can also look at how these curves happen here. And I'm just going to draw that so you can see what I'm talking about. This one here and this one here. And since we have those points on our drawing already, we know it comes from here and it comes down this grid line and over, down this grid line, and this one goes over a little bit more to this side. So we've got that. And then I can look at, there's a curve here and a curve here. And where are those curves? There's one here and one here. And again, this is just me kind of looking at it and getting just a rough idea of where things are. So then I want to go in and look at how do I take this information of the visual and make it into a line drawing of this cat. And part of that is using mark making and creating this cat and texture of the hair by using mark making. And I'm going to work in pen because it'll help you to see it better. And also it's more freeing in a certain way to work in pen, I find, because you can't go back and change things, and it's a good way of learning too. So I'm just going to tuck that under there so I have a visual to refer to. Now, even though this was a curve, when I look at my original photograph, the head is flatter, and I've got this curve that comes down here, but it goes into this part. And you notice I'm talking about curve and this part. I'm not saying the ear, or I'm trying not to, because that's another thing we teach at Aliki's. We really are mindful about, we have the right side of the brain, the left side of the brain, and the two can work together, or in some cases the left brain can get in there and tell you that's not right. And right brain thinking is a very, very creative method of thinking, and it really helps you to see things for exactly what they are. So you notice I'm using my guidelines, and I'm using my guidelines to my sketching lines to get these more solid shapes in. I'm not doing the details yet. That's important. No details. We're just getting these more prominent shapes in. And I'm going to work on the eye a bit more because this is a prominent shape. And double check my shapes. And I can go in and I'll add the details afterwards by thickening this up. And then I'll put my little line with a tick on it. And that's an important thing. Call this what it is. It's not a cat. It's a drawing of a cat. a cat is something that brushes up your against your leg while you're drawing in the studio, which I happen to have one. She's not here with me right now. And there's a difference, because when we're drawing, you want to think about this as shapes, not the object, or not what it is you are drawing. Because when you start thinking of it as a cat, that left brain engages and says, oh, well, I happen to know what a cat looks like, and a cat looks like this, or a cat looks like that. You notice I changed here because I found that this in my sketch was a little off, and that's why we have a sketch. I make this curve, and I'm just going to black in the nostrils a bit just to make it a little bit more of a shadow. Now, if you're doing this along with me, you can also work with pencil and then go over it with pen. So now I've got these more predominant shapes here, and I'm going to start with putting some texture in. So I'll start with just a bunch of lines here, and this is called hatching, and vary them. So make sure that when you're doing a line, you're not, it needs to be a little free. This part, oh, if you look carefully, these are all just ziggy-zaggies, and that's what creates this texture. So this is where it comes, and it's just fun to create these zigzag lines randomly as they go along here. This comes out a bit more, and I create this up here more. Each cat's going to maybe have a little bit more personality, or some of it depends on how you change the texture and the fluff on the face. And then I'm going to go in and add these lines here. And this again is cross hatching or hatching. We've got some lines under the eye. And if we go back to our original, I'm looking at these lines that are part of the, what do they call, whiskers, right? And then here I'm looking at just its shading here, and I've got these fur lines here. Okay, and again, kind of this, these lines up there. And I'll give it some shape here. And this one's got a very different personality, which is fun. So let's go and do these lines. And again, it's big, shaggy, I think fun, shaggy, fast lines. And if you vary them, so see how I've got some that are tighter together, some going in a different direction, some that are longer, vary it. Now we've got this line here that was part of our sketch, and that allows us to see where this comes. So I'm going to create just that, and in here these are smaller, and then these lines here don't connect because they're just kind of attached in there, and I'm varying them. I'm having some go one direction, some go the other direction. Let's look over at this side. Again, instead of the zigzaggy, I'm just going to do some, plant my pen and direction, a little bit of zigzag line here. This lines. And if you're afraid to do this, play around on a piece of paper and just make all these zigzaggy lines. So the sketch that we did was there just for us to reference. So there we've got our cat, and you notice I've got that curve on the top of what would be the nose. That I'm not drawing because that's just there to give me this muzzle shape. So now I've got everything in here, and I would go in and I'd erase everything. But before I do that, I'm going to go back to my original cat here, and I'm looking at, see how it's really dark here? It's thinner and then wider here. So I can go in with my pen, and I'm doing something that's called ping pong eyes. Ping pong eyes is where my eyes are on the drawing, back to the visual. On the drawing, back to the visual. On the drawing, back to the visual. Always looking back and forth to make sure my hand is in the right place. And the line I'm doing is appropriate to what's in the visual. And my students, even my adult students, I refer to it as ping pong eyes, because you think about when you play ping pong, it's back and forth, right? And then over here, I'm going to look too, it's very thin, it gets wider, and it's very wide down here. So very thin here. A little wider. Quite wide here. Now, of course, you could do this if you wanted to with colored pencil in here. But what we're going to do is we're going to add watercolor. And when you do watercolor, oh, I should have double checked that with this pen. It should be permanent. You want a permanent pen, so a pen that does not bleed when you go to add water. And I'm just going to double check that before I start. I've got my water here. Yeah, it does bleed. Okay, I'll just be careful. All right, so we also teach at Aliki's, we talk about our colors, and we know our primaries are red, blue, and yellow. So, and we have something called warm colors and cool colors. I'm going to show you these two that I've done. So this guy is done with cool colors for the fur, warm colors in the background and the eyes. This one is different. Cool colors in the background, warm colors in the on the fur, and cool colors on the eyes. So I'm going to do another cool color one, and I will show you a couple of different techniques when it comes to watercolor. So I'm going to start with the background just because, no particular reason. And what I'm doing is I'm painting my page with water first, just wherever that background is, and you'll see what will happen. You want to keep that water just within those areas. That's not a lot of water, right? It's just a nice little bit. And then I can take my brush and add pull up some of this here. So these are called pen watercolors. I love these. I take them all the way across Canada with me. They're highly pigmented and they last a long time. And then this brush actually has water in the barrel, so it's kind of neat to work with. So now I'm just gonna touch, and you see how this moves along and bleeds in, but it won't go into the areas where there's no water. It stops right on that edge. Now I could take a bigger brush and you'll see that it bleeds in and it stops. So I'm going to work with a bigger brush and see how I got some there. And I'm going to do, this is just a wash. So just give us a blue in the background because I want to do the cool colors. No reason why you want to do cool first, but I just like giving that cat some atmosphere, and then he pops out a bit more. Not sure why I'm calling him a he. Now I'm just going to take a green because it's in those cooler colors and just give it a little bit variation in that background, and maybe a darker blue just for some variation. That's all. And there's all sorts of things you can do and play with, and we have at the studio, we have one of our teachers is a professional, well, we're all professional artists, but she teaches amazing watercolor classes for all ages. So it'd be a great thing to learn some basic drawing techniques and then take a painting class. And that's one thing that's important for people to be aware of, is when you want to learn to paint, it's important that you learn to draw first. A good drawing background is crucial to being able to paint well. You're going to struggle big time if you haven't learned the basics of drawing and then move into painting. So I'm just adding some blue into his eyes. I'm going to go in with the deeper green just to give him some variation in there. And this is, again, is wet on wet. And I'll wait for a bit because then I can add some white or something else on top to give some highlights in those eyes. But if it's wet, it just bleeds all together. So now I'm going to go in, and we're working with warm colors. And I happen to have some yellow already here. And the thing that's nice about watercolors is you can let them dry, and then you go back to them and use them again, because yes, they've dried, but you just reactivate them with water. So I'm just going to go in and give a bit of a base coat here. Give a warm color. And again, just watching where I'm pulling that water. And a wash is a very small amount of pigment. So I'm trying to get it all over because I want this to be a uniform look. Put a little bit down in here. And then I get that warmth there. Now I'm going to go in and I want to charge this, and that's what I call it, charging it by, I load my brush here, adding water here, and pulling it over. Because this is just for, my palette is just to hold the paint, and this part over here, you want to keep these colors clean. Oh, I didn't clean that well enough. Because you don't want to mix over here. You want to mix on this palette. Okay, so I kind of like that peachy color. That's in the warm tones. So now I'm going to take my wide brush and go in again. And this, I'm going to make it a little deeper in color and just pull it in where there would be kind of more shadows here. And up here, and I'm going to go into this area because we've got a deeper color now, so it will give it more depth there. A little bit here under that area, and I want this to be a little more tapered here. And then all under here, I want it to be, because I want the head to stand away there. So I've got that. Now what do I want to do? I'm going to add some more other colors, but more intense. And I can mix them, or I'm just going to use them straight off the palette. And using my brush with water, and then I'm going to go in and add some kind of streakies where I think wherever I want this cat to have these stripes. Have fun with it. That's the nice part about something like this, is you just have fun. Oh, see, I did a little blop. That's all good. So the other thing we teach at Aliki's is no mistakes, because something like this is like this little happy accident that you hadn't planned on, but what can I do with it? I don't know. I'm just gonna, you notice how I'm using my brush very similar to how I used my pen, right? Very jaggy. I'm going to give them a little bit under here. Let's give them some color in here. And then I want to take my brush and I'm just going to soften some of this. And here's my little but I'm going to keep that edge. So as the watercolor dries, if you want to keep an edge, just don't go in there and it will keep that. And blend it out. I like these little ziggy lines here. So we've got our cat kind of starting to have some personality. I'm just going to do a little bit more. I would like to wait a little longer for this to dry, because when you do wet on wet, it's different than wet on dry. I can go in with a dry area and add more detail. But for our purpose, for this demo, it's just a real quick, fun play with watercolors and have fun just adding those colors in there. I think he needs a little darker, so I'm going to pull in a deeper brown and just kind of pull in some of these. And I can get kind of this fur thing happening here by just very similar to what we did when we were drawing, is plant and flick, plant and flick. A little bit more. And I could keep going with this lovely little guy. And if I take and do lines that are a little darker, you want to make sure you don't have too much paint or pigment, because then it can create some problems there. And I think he needs a little bit more. I know he's got a pink nose, but let's go in here and just give him a little bit of an edge here with some gray. I have a tame cat named Narcy, and we have a feral cat named Pink Nose that has adopted our deck as his own a couple of years ago, so we enjoy Pink Nose. So this is a little reminiscent of Pink Nose. Okay, I'm gonna leave that there. I'm just gonna do one more thing, and then I'll talk with you about the other ones that I've done, because I would wait until these are dry, come back to it and do some more. So if you notice in our visual here, see these little white areas? Those are reflections. And I could have left it white and worked around it, but unless you use something called frisket or masking, it's really hard to do that on watercolor. So this is where white kind of comes in. So I've got these little areas there, and I'll give them a little bit of white here, and what I do is I'll go in with my pen and do these whiskers too, but I'm just going to use a little bit of white in here just to give them, see how it comes across into there, and you can see it more. There. So we're going to leave him as that, and I'll show you these other two. This one's quite soft, it's quite a wash, right? This one I went in and did the whole wash, but then went in with heavier colors, more concentrated colors. And this one, again, it was the wet on wet, the washing, and I used tissue to kind of blot and pull. So you can see how the same cat done over and over again, you get these three different views depending on how the color's done, the size of the nose, and the colors of the eyes. So at Aliki's, we love to teach you how to break down a drawing just like this, and to play around with colors and have fun. Well, thank you for joining me in my studio. I'm glad I could take some time and show you a few little tricks. And I would really love it if you could check out what we have to offer, both online and in studio, at alikisarthouse.com. I hope you enjoy creating.